In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, Christ is in our midst. You know, if everyone in the narthex, come on in. That's fine. It's okay. Okay, here's the question. See, you never know what's going to pop out of the pulpit, right? But what's wrong with this clock? It's upside down? It's backwards, right? The numbers are backwards? Well, I wanted to tell you that there's absolutely nothing wrong with this clock. This is how time is measured in the Bible. So we hear today in the gospel reading, we hear that he came in the fourth watch of the night. Right? And we hear many times that he was, let me read a couple of the quotes that I have here. Again, he went out about the 6th hour and the 9th hour. And he went out about the 3rd hour and saw others standing idle in the marketplace. And then another quote from Matthew 27 says, and about the 9th hour, Jesus cried with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. We've all heard that, right? And from the 6th hour to the 9th hour, there was darkness over the land. We remember hearing that. And then we hear about the watches. And the watches, we hear today that Christ came in the 4th watch of the night. Now, one of the things that I wanted to say about the gospel reading is the measuring of space and also the measuring of time was different. And it can become complicated. And I was going to talk a little bit about St. Peter falling in the water, but then I figured, you know what, I'm going to explain, if you don't know what time it happened, and you don't know how the clock actually works in the Bible, then it's something that we miss. Now, a furlong is the gospel speaks about today. It says that the boat was many furlongs away from the shore. So what is a furlong? A furlong is 220 yards. So it's a little over 2 football fields and the 20-yard line, okay? So 2 football fields. It says it was many furlongs. So maybe it was 1,000 yards away, if you want to say it's 5 furlongs or so, or 1,100 yards away. But one of the things I wanted to do was take a second and talk about the clock, okay? For those who are in the back, I don't know how to make this any larger, but basically what it is everything is inverted and backwards, okay? So instead of the 12 being on the top, the 6 is on the top. The 9 is here where the 3 is, the 12 is where the 6 is, and the 3 is where the 9 is, okay? So when we hear about the time, we normally start the time here, right? We start from midnight and we go. The clock in the Bible time starts here at the bottom, which is typically sunset. So this clock overlays our current clock. So it's not like the time is shifted. It's just this is how time is marked, okay? So if you were at 9 o'clock, the 9th hour here in the Bible, you're actually at 3 o'clock, okay? So nothing changes. It's just the numbers that account for that time changes, okay? So 6 o'clock is midnight in the Bible time, okay? That is the start of the new day. So the day starts 6 o'clock in the morning, and it changes in the evening. It starts the next 12-hour cycle, okay? So it starts in the morning. So when we hear St. John Chrysostom say, those who have come at the 1st hour, those who have come at the 3rd hour, and then the 11th hour. We all kind of know that the 11th hour means the last minute, but the 11th hour is the last hour before it's the next day. So that's an important thing to remember. Now, when we talk about the service of the hours in the church, the 3rd hour, between the 3rd hour and the 6th hour, or 6th hour and the 9th hour, we hear those quotes that I just said. Here's where it lays out. So 3rd hour is actually 9 o'clock. The 6th hour is noon, and the 9th hour is 3 o'clock. That's daytime hours. Now, here's where it gets a little bit tricky. And I'm not good at math, so if I'm not explaining this well, that's why I'm not a mathematician. That's daytime hours. So the daytime hours are considered hours. 1st hour, 3rd hour, 6th hour, 9th hour. In the evening, when it turns evening time, they're called watches. So the 1st watch, the 2nd watch, the 3rd watch, and the 4th watch, okay? First watch is here, when it first becomes evening. Second watch is here, 9 o'clock at night. Third watch is midnight, it would be, midnight according to that time. And then fourth watch would be 3 in the morning. Okay? I'm going to say it one more time. First watch is 6 p.m. Second watch is 9 p.m. Third watch is midnight. Fourth watch is 3 a.m., and that's the last watch. That starts from the Roman times when the Roman soldiers used to be given certain watches. They say, your first watch, second watch. Now we have like shifts or our kind of things, right? We have day shift, evening shift, midnight shift. They did watches, and they did 3 hours in those times. So Christ, here's the interesting thing about the gospel reading today, is that like last week I spoke about the feeding of the 5,000 and the feeding of the 4,000 are two separate events. There's also two separate events where Christ is with them in the boat when the water is bad. If you go to the 8th chapter of Matthew, which is page 25, you can either go to it or not, it doesn't matter. But verse 23, it says, "Now when he got into the boat with his disciples followed him, and suddenly a great tempest arose on the sea, so that the boat was covered with the waves, but he, Christ, was asleep. Then his disciples came to him and awoke him, saying, 'Lord, save us, we are perishing.' But he said to them, 'Why are you fearful, O you of little faith?' Then he arose and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm. So the men marveled, saying, 'Who can this be? Even the winds and the sea obey him.'" So the disciples are speaking about, now you have to think of the disciples too. This is not anything new for them, right? They're fishermen. They know how to swim. They've been in bad waters before. The sea was really their classroom. That's where they grew up. So you're talking about people who by trait are doing what they do. They're in a boat. This probably wasn't the first time that they had a bad storm. Now, this is just a few chapters, about 6 chapters before today's reading. But the response of Christ is the exact same response. "Oh, you of little faith." Now, if you look in today's gospel reading, he comes across the water, and now they've already had this first experience where Christ has calmed the water. So Peter says, "Let me come out to you on the water." And he comes out, and as we know, he gets distracted, and he starts to sink, and then Christ walks him into the boat, and then again says, "Why did you doubt, O you of little faith?" Again, the same statement. But the interesting thing, too, is that he comes in the 4th watch of the night, as it says, which is right here. He comes at 3 a.m. Now, he left them in the gospel reading in the evening, right? In the evening, and he's there, and he sends them across, and then the boat is like trying to go across, but they can't get across. That's why it's far enough where it's far away, but they're not making it to the other side, right? So they're rowing, they're getting nowhere. And then Christ comes to them on the water, and then again, it's that doubt, and if it's really you, call me to you, and he does, and we hear the rest of the story, and then again, the water's calm, they go across to the other side. But Christ waits until 3 a.m., the 4th watch, which would be 9 according to the biblical clock, if you want to call it that, or the Hebrew marking of time. So he lets them work all night long, really. I mean, 3 o'clock in the morning is really, that's kind of the hour that people wake up and they're like, it's too early to get up, but it's, what's the deal? And, that many times can be the middle of the night is considered 3 o'clock, right? I mean, it's kind of when it is for most people. So we look and we say, well, why does he wait till the 4th watch? Why does he wait till 3 in the morning to come to them? And one of the reasons, I believe, is that he lets them toil. He lets them work. He lets them use their talents and their skills. Now, these are fishermen. This is not anything new for them. He didn't say, I took a bunch of scribes and people who were librarians and I put them in a boat and said, now go sail to the other side and I'll meet you over there. He doesn't do that. He takes people who are distinctly fishermen who have had the experience. Now, Peter's older, right? And Andrew, his brother, is older. That's why Andrew is right there on the above where Kosa's head is. Andrew is an older disciple. They've had experience being fishermen. This is nothing new at all. But they're not getting anywhere. And then Christ lets them toil. Can they do it on their own? And they also realize that they cannot do what they initially started to do on their own anymore. Now, I think that's a realization that we all come to, realizing that we do certain things, but we also realize that there comes an end to what we can do. And then when we look to God and we say, let me come to you, then we realize that He is the one that takes us the distance that we can't get on our own, by our own skills. But one of the things that the church has always remembered in the prayer cycle of the church is these particular hours of time, that there's significant events that happen. And in the fourth watch, the 3 a.m., is a lot of times, let me pull up some things here. In Genesis 33, Jacob wrestles with God until sunrise. So it's the 3 a.m. to sunrise that he wrestles with God in that. The Israelites crossed the Red Sea in the fourth watch. They crossed at 3 in the morning. In Exodus, Gideon defeated the Midianites in Judges chapter 7:19 in the fourth watch again. And likewise, in this particular gospel reading, Christ comes to them in the fourth watch of the night. So there's something to be said about that 3 a.m. time. Now, many times people mention that they wake up at 3 a.m. They don't know why. They wake up and they sit there and they lay there. Maybe you have that particular issue, maybe you don't. But one of the things that I read recently was that many times we're awoken at that time so that we can reach out in prayer. We can reach out to God in the time when we realize we're at our most vulnerable, that we are, our body's still paralyzed from sleep, and we kind of wake up and we're kind of in it and out of it, and you think about dream times. You might snap out of a dream at that time. You might even go into a dream after that time, or you may not dream at all. But that 3 a.m. is a time for us, if you wake up at that time, to say even just a brief prayer, to ask God to come to you, to ask for you to reach out to God so that He will come to you in your distress of your life. Our lives, if you think about it, you go through a day and you can have a bunch of traumatic things that happen during the day. And you can get through it. You eat, you go to the next thing. Time pushes you along in the day. Whether or not you're ready for it or whether or not you are excited about your day or not, time moves you through the day. But then when you lay down at night is when everything starts to run through your mind, right? You lay down and you start thinking about the day. You start saying, oh man, I got this and that. And sometimes we can't sleep because we have so many things running through our head, and we're trying to do like a debriefing of the day mentally in the middle of the night. You might sleep for a couple hours, you might snap out of sleep, and then you're traumatized for the rest of the night. I worked with a particular police officer who had a very traumatic incident happen to him, and he was unable for years. And one of the things that he mentioned was he would go to sleep. He would sleep for about 2 hours and then snap out of sleep, sweating, breathing heavy, and thinking about this traumatic incident, and was unable to go back to sleep. And one of the things that he uses now as a tool is to take that time and to reach out to God. Instead of wrestling with it on our own, that we reach out to God in those times, and we ask Him for that help. Because those times are critical times for us. They're critical when we wake up and we realize, I don't have in the tank what I need to get through the day. And I don't have a reserve to even contend with digesting yesterday. So we wake up, and that is a time for us to be called to prayer. And why 3 a.m. many times? Is because that's the biblical time when we are awoken. And we come to the point where we realize that this is the last watch. This is before the new day starts. This is before we realize that the day before us is completely over and we need to make a change for the next day. This is the day that we greet the Son, and we greet the Son, S-O-N, of righteousness, as the hymns of Christmas speak about. So what am I saying with all this clock stuff? Well, first of all, hopefully this will help you. I'm going to leave this down for the rest of the liturgy. But hopefully this will help you understand when we hear about in the 3rd hour he did this, in the 6th hour he did this, the 9th hour, and in the watches too. And to think about 3 a.m. is our difficult time. And many times it's right before we realize that we're completely broken and we can't do any more, that two things happen. First, we begin to reach out to God, right? As a priest, I've seen for years people with kind of sedated spiritual lives are immediately given the defibrillator of spirituality when they're in the hospital, and they actually need a real defibrillator. And they're like, Father, looking at the fluorescent lights, and they're like, I don't know if I'm going to make it, and I gotta straighten things out with God. And all of a sudden, boom, that's their 4th watch. And that's the time when they start to wake up. But all of us have that opportunity when we realize that we're broken to come to the point of starting new, starting to reach out to God and letting Him transform us and letting Him make us new, whole, and to reach out to Him, to walk to Him on the water, and then to ask Him to come to us too, to calm the storm that is within our hearts and within our souls. So I pray that this new understanding of time, and it was interesting because when I first flipped this down, I said, what's going on here? Everybody's like, the clock's broken. But it's not broken. It's just different. And everything in our spiritual life has to be different from what we perceive. It's interesting, sometimes people will tell me stories about, they'll say, Father, the other day I was praying and I saw an angel. And the angel said, go repent and go to confession, or whatever the case was. And they say, well, you probably think that's crazy. No, I don't think it's crazy. I think it's different from what the world thinks is crazy. And what we understand as far as time, what we understand as far as our own skills, have to be separated from the worldly perspective. It has to be that we understand our strength comes with God, that we understand that our weakness is based in ourselves, and those are reverse from society. And we also have to understand that there's a different way of understanding time. And I pray that this helps clarify those understandings of time in the Bible for you. Amen.